It's recording. Hi, Dr. Eastman.
Hi, Abby.
Okay, so Dr. Eastman, why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about your background?
So I've been a friend of Abby's for a good 12 years now, at least. I've been doing research in labs since 2005. I've worked in influenza, acute lung injury, one of the things that COVID can develop into called acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. I've also worked in a lot of other things like Alzheimer's disease and pregnancy. But I got my PhD from the University of Michigan in lung infections.
Ooh, the actual document. That's
Yep.
really fat.
So I know a lot about lung immunology, and we hear all about vaccines. There's a ton of vaccine development going on in all the universities, so we get exposed to it constantly. And so I've got a pretty good background for it. My PhD is in immunology, so studying the immune system and talking about vaccines is kind of what I do.
Sweet. And just for a quick visual accessibility note, I think we're two blonde white women. I'm wearing glasses. Dr. Eastman is not. Do you have short hair right now? I think you do.
You have short hair right now.
Yeah. Okay. What's behind you?
There's an Escher painting that my dad gave me, and then actually a public health poster about COVID that Vanderbilt had.
Oh, cool. Okay. Behind me are some houseplants, but they're really blurred. So they look kind of like weird ghost people. All right. Awesome. Okay. So let's jump into it. I have some questions about vaccines and COVID because I do not have a science background. I have a sociology background. It's totally different. So my concerns are, the first one is, what is COVID/RNA? What's RNA virus? And what's up with all these variants?
Okay, so there's a very long answer to that. So there's kind of a buildup that you need to get to answer all of those questions.
Okay.
So I'll start with the basics. So COVID-19 is a disease. It's short for coronavirus disease 2019. So that's the disease itself. It's caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is a new coronavirus that was discovered when it started causing outbreaks in late 2019. So trying to get onto what an RNA virus is, I'll kind of lead you through a quick overview of all of biology in the world.
Okay, oh my gosh.
So the tree of life is composed of different types of cells, one of which is called a prokaryote, which is your basic bacteria, things like E. coli and gonorrhea. Then there's eukaryotes, which are everything from yeast to humans. And then there's a really cool intermediate group called the archaea, which is kind of an interesting crossover between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So viruses are typically not included on the tree of life because they are a bit strange. So all of the cells on the tree of life have their genome as a double-stranded DNA backbone, the double helix that you see in movies.
What did I just do? I hit something. Oh no, I muted you. How did I mute you? Okay, good.
I unmuted me. I should be okay now.
Okay.
So DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Our DNA is divided up into genes, which mostly provide the template to make a protein. And it has to go through an intermediate molecule called RNA, which is ribonucleic acid. The structural difference between DNA and RNA is actually a hydroxyl group on the sugar ribose. So a hydroxyl group is a combination of oxygen and hydrogen, and it's abbreviated as OH. So deoxyribonucleic acid is missing one of the OHs. Ribonucleic acid has all of the OHs. It seems like a really small point, but it makes a huge difference. Because of that oxygen group, RNA is really unstable, and it usually stays as a single strand. So DNA is usually double-stranded, RNA is single-stranded. It's made up, let's see. Yeah. So RNA is made by a group of proteins that binds to the beginning of a gene on a cell's DNA. They use the DNA as a code to make an RNA transcript. And then that RNA transcript leaves the nucleus, goes into the cytoplasm, and is made into a protein. So this RNA strand is called a messenger RNA. And so DNA is in the nucleus, RNA is formed in the nucleus and then goes to the cytoplasm. RNA is copied from DNA, but it is not DNA itself. It's quite different and very differently, it has different stability.
Okay.
So proteins are what do all the work in your cells. Some key features of RNA are that it really cannot change the original DNA code whatsoever. The extra OH in the RNA makes that impossible, and RNA is really short-lived. It's very quickly degraded in the cell for a lot of different reasons. So as far as viruses go, some viruses have a double-stranded DNA genome like ours, like everything on the tree of life. But others have genomic structures that are different. They'll have a single-stranded DNA genome, a single-stranded RNA genome, and even some have double-stranded RNA genomes. So viruses that have RNA-based genomes, whether they're single or double-stranded, mutate a lot more quickly than DNA viruses because of how unstable RNA is, and also because when DNA is replicated, there are proteins that proofread it and check it for errors. Things like that don't exist for RNA, so the mutation rate is way higher, which is why mutation rates for RNA viruses are much higher, and the SARS-CoV-2 virus is RNA-based. So that's how you're getting the variants from the SARS-CoV-2 virus, is that the RNA genome is pretty unstable and it makes a lot of mutations in it. A lot of those wind up killing the virus, but some of them make it much better able to infect cells. So like the variants that we're talking about when we talk about alpha, beta, lambda, delta, gamma, et cetera, they have one or more mutations that make them behave differently. So specifically, the Delta variant has a mutation in its spike protein, which is the outer protein on the virus that is necessary to bind the cell that the virus wants to infect. And so the Delta variant has a mutation that makes it a lot easier for the virus to bind the cell. So the Delta variant infects more cells, makes more of itself, and so the infection is faster.
Okay, that is a lot.
It is a lot.
So that's why it mutates.
Yeah, so DNA goes to RNA, goes to protein. It's called the central dogma of biology. Okay. And then RNA is pretty unstable. And so RNA can't really affect DNA, which is why you're not going to get effects from the mRNA vaccines into your genome.
Oh, they're separate.
Yeah. They're very different, despite the fact that they look kind of similar, but they're extremely different and they don't interact in that way.
Okay, that is very important to know. Thanks. Okay, I have another question, a few more questions. Yeah. How does the vaccine work? Does it rewrite my DNA? Will it give me cancer? And also other weird side effects. Like, I don't know, I've heard a lot of people have all kinds of stuff.
Now, I've been reading all about the vaccine development for ever since it started happening. And one thing is that the basis of all the vaccines that are made against SARS-CoV-2 are to get your immune system to recognize and neutralize or kill anything that looks like it has a particular protein on it, which in this case of basically all of the vaccines that are in use, it's against that spike protein on the outside. Okay. So the immune system mostly does the production of antibodies. You've probably heard a lot about, and those are done by B cells, which are lymphocytes, which are specialized white blood cells. So I can start with the Pfizer and Moderna technologies because they work pretty similarly, and they're the main ones that came out first. Mm-hmm. So these vaccines have two components. They have a shell of lipids or fats that keeps the inside from getting degraded. And then they have the mRNA transcript of the SARS-CoV-2 gene that codes for its spike protein. So the piece of the SARS-CoV-2 genome, which is RNA, that makes its spike protein is all that is entered into your cell. And so this is in the form of RNA. It goes into the cytoplasm. It is translated into the actual spike protein. And so your cells then show your immune system the spike protein without having any of the other pieces of the virus in there. So all of your immunity that is generated from these two vaccines are against the spike protein exclusively. Oh, interesting. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine are a bit similar, except they use a specialized virus called an adenovirus, from which they have removed all the genes that allow the virus to replicate. And then they have inserted the gene for the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. So one thing about the Johnson & Johnson and the Oxford AstraZeneca one is that the gene that codes for the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein has to be put into DNA because the adenovirus is a DNA virus. So it's not going to, you can't just put RNA in there and hope that it will get into your cell.
So is that going to alter my DNA?
So probably no. It is not easy to reintegrate DNA into the genome, especially from a virus. So some specialized viruses can do that. They're called retroviruses, but and that includes things like HIV. But adenoviruses do not have the proteins that you need to insert a DNA molecule into the genome. So the DNA for the spike protein is called episomal DNA, and it means that it's not integrated into your actual genome. I do have to say that I found one paper from 11 years ago in the Journal of Virology, which is a good journal, that thought they found DNA from an adenoviral vector, which is this similar technology, that integrated into the host genome of 1 in every 14,000 liver cells during their model of gene delivery into the liver. So that was 11 years ago, and it has not been replicated ever since. And science is all about replication. And there are a ton of other studies that show that adenoviral vector delivery of DNA does not have integration into the host genome. So if there's no integration, there's no cancer. And the majority of studies, except for one, show that there's really no integration of this DNA into your genome.
So it really just protects me against SARS-CoV-19 and it doesn't change my DNA?
Right. So there's no way of getting this extra piece of DNA that the adenovirus is carrying into your genome.
Okay.
So the way that it could cause cancer, if it was to insert into the genome, would be to interrupt a cancer suppressing gene. So if the DNA could insert into the genome and it interrupted an important gene, that would be what could cause cancer. But the DNA cannot really get into the genome, so that's not going to cause cancer.
So it can't cause cancer.
It should not be able to cause cancer. I would go as far as say it can't cause.
Okay, at this point, we know it should not be causing cancer. Yeah. Okay, I appreciate the honesty. Okay, so I have more questions. Okay, I kind of already asked. Let's see, how does it work? Will it remember my DNA? Will it give me cancer? It should not give me cancer. Okay. Are there any other side effects? Like, because I'm really concerned. A lot of my friends are really concerned about side effects from the vaccine. Like, I don't know, like blood clotting, and people have told me that lots of people are dying from the vaccine.
So the deaths from the vaccine, the statistics are that there are over 2 billion people who have received at least one dose of any of the vaccines. Some of which are only a single dose vaccine, some of which are a double dose. And so the only major health concerns from these vaccines, I'll start with the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson ones.
Okay.
There's a very rare case of blood clot disorder called vaccine-induced immune thrombotic thrombocytopenia, VITT. And so this is a weird condition, and it's tied to mostly the Oxford and a little bit of the Johnson & Johnson. The rate of that is 1 in 50,000 people. The condition is not uniformly fatal, and treating and monitoring for it is getting a lot better since people know what to expect. And compared to the odds of dying of COVID, it's well over 10 times your risk of, dying of COVID is 10 times more likely to happen to you than getting any of these side effects from AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson.
So you're saying that if I get the vaccine, my odds of dying are less, even though there's these possible side effects of blood clotting?
Yeah, so the incidence of blood clotting is about 1 in 50,000, and it does not lead to death uniformly. COVID death rates are about 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 10,000. So you're much more likely to have complications from COVID than you are from the vaccines.
Wow. Okay, that's good to know. Okay.
And so another side effect that's linked to the mRNA vaccines, like the Pfizer and the Moderna, is some anaphylactic responses. So when an immediate,
what's anaphylactic?
So that's when the sort of immune cells in your body start to go nuts, and they release a whole bunch of things that really disrupt how your body functions. It's very bad. But it can be treated when you have a medical professional there who's expecting it, and they're expecting it. So anyone who's getting the mRNA vaccine requires you to be monitored with EMTs or paramedics or other trained medical staff. And as soon as it looks like you might be going into anaphylaxis, the medical professionals can intervene with, I think, a shot of like adrenaline to prevent any effects from the anaphylaxis. It's a bad situation, but you're still going to get the protection from the vaccine. And with the monitoring, it's not going to go very far. It's not going to go towards death.
So as long as there's medical professionals around, I'll be safe.
Yeah, so I think you're required to be supervised for at least 15 to 30 minutes by EMTs or paramedics.
Okay.
And so there's kind of a waiting room after you get the vaccine where you sit there and make sure you don't die. And
Okay.
if you're coming, if you start to get anaphylaxis, you're being monitored and people are going to come intervene. So those are the main two things linked to vaccines.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so another question I have, a lot of my friends with parent, or a lot of my parent friends have too. I don't have kids. Kids aren't really affected by COVID-19, are they?
So they didn't seem to be in the beginning, but the Delta variant is changing everything. They seem to be a lot more susceptible. It's maybe because they may not be as affected by the infection as an unvaccinated adult, but since they can't be vaccinated yet, they don't have the protection that vaccinated older kids and adults have. And so relative to like their vaccinated parents and older siblings, they're a little bit more likely to get it than them. Whether they're more likely than an unvaccinated adult is still unclear, but the Delta variant seems to be making things a lot worse.
So can kids die of COVID?
Yes.
Oh.
I work at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and their pediatric ICU is full of kids with COVID-19, and there are deaths.
Oh no. Okay, that's not good. But kids can't get the vaccine, can they?
So kids 12 and over can get the vaccine. Approval for the vaccine in younger children is in progress. What they're doing is making sure that the dose of what's called antigen, so the amount of your mRNA from the vaccine that's getting in there, isn't going to overwhelm a child's immune system, because they work a little bit differently when the kid's still developing.
Okay.
And so, those studies are ongoing to make sure that kids are getting the right dose that will give them immunity, but will not harm them in any way.
Well, that's promising. Okay.
If you give too much antigen, you can get more of a response, and that can be a little bit dangerous. So it's very titered to people's sizes and developmental.
So it sounds like they're doing a lot of research and testing before they put it on humans.
Oh yeah. So I got the COVID vaccine pretty early, and I was involved in a number of studies at Vanderbilt. So people that I know who are running studies on COVID vaccine responses, I'm involved in those. People are watching everything.
Oh, that's good. Okay. How do we know the vaccine is safe though? I know you just told me all this scientific stuff, but how do we know the vaccine is safe? Because the government has lied before. And haven't a lot of people died from the vaccine? I just have to ask again, because come on.
So deaths actually from the vaccine are extremely rare, like single to double digits in over 2 billion people. There are statistics of people who have died of things while they are undergoing vaccination. They have cancer and they get the vaccine, and so they've technically died within the vaccine efficacy window. So it's hard to sort those out. But as far as things that have definitively been linked to vaccines, there are very, very few deaths linked to it. I agree that the governments are not very trustworthy.
Right.
So instead of trusting a government, I would say trust the scientific community around the world. This is a massive effort. People have been doing research on this technology since the 80s and 90s. People have been doing PhDs on it. They've been devoting their careers to it and trying to make this technology safe. And the majority of scientists in the world are not going to allow something damaging to happen like this. There's far too much communication between us. We review everything online. People put up their data on things like bioRxiv and other preprint servers, so people analyze it. There's so much talk between people that even if you don't trust the government, you can trust academic researchers who have no ties to pharmaceutical companies, just trying to make sure that people are safe.
Oh, so a lot of these academic researchers don't have ties with pharmaceutical companies?
No, I mean, some really high up people will do consulting work for pharmaceutical companies, and they'll disclose that. The universities require it. But for the most part, people are not tied and they're trying to separate themselves from pharmaceutical companies so that they don't have any conflicts of interest like that. And so like, especially younger scientists are not going to have those ties. So as people are getting towards like being a bigwig in the sciences, they might have more ties to pharmaceutical companies, which I also think are a bit untrustworthy sometimes. But I would trust the people who are carrying out the epidemiological studies, who are usually at universities. They're much more trustworthy.
So are you telling me that you're not rich?
No.
Oh.
No.
So you're not making money off me getting weird experimental stuff from the government?
Shit, no. No,
Okay.
my salary is like $40,000 to $50,000 with a PhD. People are not in academia for money.
Oh, that's news to me. Just kidding. Okay. Whoa, Allison or Dr. Eastman, sorry, you just told everyone your salary. Very transparent, very honest, very honest scientist. But I feel like I looked at
so all the pay rates are posted on the NIH website. The NIH has specific requirements of what people get paid in certain positions, and so every position has their pay line.
Oh, I didn't know that. So
yeah, you can always look up someone's salary.
You're regulated. Who knew? Okay, I'm looking for the rest of the questions that I have, because I still don't trust. Oh my gosh, where are they coming from? Okay. So we just asked about. Okay. The government's lied before and you told me to trust scientists. Okay, now number 5. What do you mean it's the most tested and examined and scrutinized vaccine ever? Because it came out way too fast.
So part of it is that all this technology that went into these vaccines, both the adenovirus vaccines and the mRNA vaccines, have been in development for 40 or 50 years. Like I was saying a little bit earlier, like people have been doing their PhDs on this since the 80s. They've been devoting their careers to it. So this is not new technology. It's the first implementation of it in humans in a large scale like this. But as far as like having determined whether these things are safe, there's a lot of literature from the past several decades that have gone into this. So it's not actually as quick a process as people might think. This has been millions probably of hours of scientists for decades that have been leading to these studies. So the actual combination of this coronavirus mRNA and the lipids that are in the Pfizer vaccine is pretty new, but the technology that made them has been around for a long time and it's been very well tested.
Oh.
So it's actually pretty fascinating how well these things are working. I'm extremely impressed, and I got the vaccine very early. I was excited for it.
Cool.
Also, when I'm saying it's been scrutinized, like literally every scientist that I talk to, we all know all about the vaccine. We study it, we read the papers, we read the epidemiology about it, we read the pharmacology about it, we read the chemistry, and we talk about it. And so with all of this interesting, smart people looking at the same things, trying to find anything that might be dangerous, there's a lot of working together, trying to make sure that these vaccines are safe. And as far as the scientific community goes, we haven't found anything super worrisome.
Okay.
So, I mean, with the amount of communication that you can get between scientists all around the world, there's a lot of scrutiny that people who have no ties to the pharmaceutical industry are making, and the broad consensus is that these are safe.
So, but is that because like this is like created by Bill Gates or something? Do you think it's like some kind of like rich person like spread this virus on purpose?
So as to whether it came out of the Wuhan labs or whether it developed from I think a bat or a pangolin virus,
or Bill Gates.
Bill Gates isn't a very great scientist. I don't think he can do it. Yeah. I don't think he himself can make bioweapons, so I wouldn't think so. I don't think there's a microchip in it either. The needles are too small that they use to inject you with the vaccine. You couldn't get a microchip in there. They're not small enough yet.
Okay.
As far as other rich people who might be making money off of this, I don't know, maybe Jeff Bezos and people who make Zoom are making some money off of it, but I think that's kind of an unintended side effect.
All right, all right. Okay. What's the point of getting the vaccine if I could still get COVID? Won't my natural immune system be just as good as that? I have a lot of friends who drink turmeric tea and chamomile and licorice, and they do yoga and breath exercises, meditation. Like, isn't that better than this vaccine?
So these are pretty different things that we're talking about. Eating healthy helps to keep your body in a good state to recognize intruding pathogens, but it doesn't make your response against them any better. Especially it involves what's called the adaptive immune system. So these vaccines that you're taking, what they do is they go through what's called the innate immune system, which is the initial response. So it's cells that see the virus first, they degrade it, and then they present it on the surface of their cells to other parts of the immune system called the adaptive cells. This is your B cells and your T cells that you've probably heard about. So those ones have a very specific job and they recognize specific things. So no matter how much turmeric or cumin or ginger you have, it's not going to make those cells recognize a new pathogen any better. Those cells are going to be healthier maybe. And so when they do encounter a thing, they'll be better able to reproduce, but it's not going to make you have a B cell that is going to recognize your pathogen quicker. So you still need to get a vaccine or get infected in order to get your adaptive immune system going. And it's the adaptive immune system that results in long, prolonged immunity. What happens is that cells that recognize pieces of the virus get this sort of immortality. They become what are called memory cells, and they hang out in your bone marrow, and they just keep looking in your bloodstream for bad things that they recognize. When they recognize them, then they start activating again.
Okay.
And the reason that the vaccine seems to be better than natural immunity, which is what happens after you get infected, is that the vaccines are all targeted at one piece of the virus. It's the spike protein. So both of the, well, I shouldn't say that. All the ones with the adenovirus base and the mRNA base, so AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and Pfizer, are all very specifically looking at the outside of the virus on this one protein. And that's beneficial to preventing infection in cells because what your body does is produce antibodies. They bind to the surface of the virus, and that way the virus can't get into your cells. With things like natural immunity and vaccines that are against like the whole virus, what happens is that pieces of the virus that are inside are also generating an immune response. And that is useful in a different way, and it may not be as good in the beginning. So in order for your immune system to mount a response against something, it has to see it. So if your B cells that are making antibodies towards something on the inside of the virus, like proteins that are on the inside of the virus that I can't remember what they're called here, probably structural proteins. That means that they're not actually going to see it until it infects a cell, and that cell then displays what is inside of it. And so for natural immunity, you're not getting as much of a response directed towards the outside, and you're getting a lot more of like a broader range of things that are in the virus. So that kind of gets into what's called an antigen. And so that's a piece of a virus or a bacteria that your immune system recognizes. And so you can have tons of pieces of antigen in your virus and bacteria. And so the more antigens your immune system recognizes, the more protection against the whole thing that you have. So actually what recent studies have shown is that the combination of having been infected with COVID and then having gotten a vaccine gives you the best protection, because you have protection against the insides of the virus that after your cells have been infected, and then you have protection against the virus in your bloodstream or tissues to try and neutralize that and get rid of it before it infects your cells.
So should I just get COVID and then get a vaccine? Or do you think it's better to get a vaccine first?
I would try to get the vaccine first, and then if you get COVID after, it's going to be a lot better. Your infection. So recent studies with the Delta variant show that vaccinated people will still get infected. They will still get viral replication similar to unvaccinated people, but it doesn't last as long. So the virus clears your system a lot quicker, which means that you're not contagious for as long, you won't infect as many other people, and you won't have as many complications developing over a long infection.
Okay. Okay. So what you're saying is that you think the vaccine is more helpful than just my usual herbal remedies and yoga.
Yeah, the herbal remedies are not going to help the system, your immune system, recognize the virus. It kind of boosts all of your cells, but maybe, but it's not going to help the ones that you need to be specifically activated against the virus.
Okay.
It's kind of a lock and key system, and so keeping your body healthy is a great way to give yourself an advantage, but it's not going to prevent you from getting an infection.
And even can a healthy person get really severe COVID?
Yeah, there's been a lot of documented cases about that. People of all ages and people that have no comorbidities. They don't have asthma. They're not immune compromised. They're not obese. It seems to be it's concentrated in people that have other like health problems that are going on, but it's not exclusively to that.
So it's like Russian roulette. It's random.
Yeah.
Oh no. Okay, that's good to know. Okay. So if I've gotten the vaccine, which I got the AstraZeneca, can I spread COVID to other people after my vaccine?
So in the beginning of the vaccination effort, it looked like you could not. There was a couple of studies out from, I think, Korea and Israel that were showing that people who had the vaccine did not transmit the virus. But like I was saying before, the Delta variant is changing everything. And so people who have the vaccine still can get COVID and can spread the virus because they do have an active viral infection. The good thing about the vaccines, though, is that, like I said before, again, it shortens the amount of time that you're producing virus, and so you're not infecting as many people. You're less likely to. You're not infecting. There are fewer days that you have the possibility of infecting people.
Okay, so that's good. So I should still get the vaccine, but I can still infect other people.
With Delta, yes, unfortunately.
And as you said in the beginning, like RNA viruses, they mutate. That's what they do. So we have Delta now, but what epsilon, gamma, what are the other Greek letters? We might have like future variants. It's possible.
Yeah. So what's probably going to happen is that SARS-CoV-2 viruses are going to become endemic in the population, kind of like influenza. People seem to be agreeing now that we're not going to get rid of this virus totally.
What is endemic?
So endemic means there's usually a definition among epidemiologists and public health people that kind of sets a low background and occasionally fluctuating levels of a virus. So it's not in a constant outbreak, but it may have some seasonal fluctuations. So if influenza is considered endemic, where it exists all the time. It's not usually a massive problem, but it does tend to spike in certain seasons. And so that's likely what's going to happen with SARS-CoV-2 viruses, is that you're going to get more variants. You're going to have to maybe get a booster shot, but maybe they'll change the mRNA that's in the vaccine every so often just to make sure it's better. Kind of like how they do with flu. They grow the flu virus or the flu vaccine, the virus for the flu vaccine in eggs. They'll grow particular ones that seem to be the ones that are infecting people that year. And it's, you hope that those ones stay in the circulation and that your vaccine works really well. It may be very similar to that, where you look at the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2 viruses in circulation, and then you use the mRNA for that one, and that one may change throughout the years.
So is a flu shot like a vaccine?
Flu shot is a vaccine, yeah. Those are usually whole influenza viruses that have been heat killed.
Okay.
And so that just, you've heated the virus, which means you've denatured the proteins, which means that the virus can't function. It's thought that this mRNA technology may wind up changing how flu vaccines are produced, because it's a lot faster to make this. Like I was saying, influenza, you have to grow it up in eggs usually, which is why people who have egg allergies can't usually get the flu vaccine.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, viruses grow in weird shit sometimes, but yeah, this one, so you may start seeing development of new influenza vaccines that you may be able to be more quickly produced and more efficacious.
So is this vaccine, like is the COVID vaccine, is it grown on eggs? So it's not grown on eggs. So people with egg allergies can take this vaccine.
Right. So this is, it's pretty easy to produce RNA in the lab and DNA in the lab. And then the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines are encased in lipids and the nanoparticles. And so those are just produced in the lab.
Okay.
And then the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson ones are adenovirus based. And so adenovirus can replicate in a lot of different cells. And so you can kind of just, you don't have to use eggs for that one. It'll replicate in many other things instead.
So, okay, I know that you're not a medical doctor, you're a researcher, you're a scientist in the lab, but is there anybody that you know for sure who should just never get this COVID-19 vaccine? Like, are there certain people that should just never get it? Like, do you know for sure?
I don't think that is known yet, and I don't think that there are broad classifications that should not get it. I know that there's some risk of, if people have developed anaphylaxis to other things in the past, they think there might be a greater risk to that, and so it's more like make sure that you're being monitored by the staff that's there, and maybe give them a heads up that you've had a reaction before. But one of the things I've been looking up is what causes that anaphylaxis reaction. And it's not really known yet, but there's a compound in the lipids that make up the shell of the vaccine and the AstraZeneca and the Moderna ones that can maybe cause some allergic reactions in some people. And the chemical is common in some things and not so much in others. And the route of administration really changes how the anaphylaxis might happen. And so an intramuscular injection is less likely to lead to anaphylaxis than things like an IV infusion. So it's a little bit, if people have had anaphylaxis reactions before, it doesn't necessarily mean they will be more likely to get them with this, but it's a concern. I've got a lot of pregnant friends who have had the vaccine during different trimesters of pregnancy, and it seemed to work very well on all of them. Some of them have delivered already with no complications. Others are in third trimester, delivering in October, and other ones are delivering in early spring, I think. And so, a lot of them have gotten the vaccine before, right at the beginning, middle, and end, and there doesn't seem to be much of an issue with
so unless your doctor specifically tells you, like, you can be pregnant and get the vaccine, okay? Like, unless your doctor has specifically like told you that you have a special circumstance.
Yeah, especially with the Delta virus, it seems to be a lot worse in pregnant women than the standard viruses. And so, as it's getting worse, it's causing more problems in pregnant women. And so even if there were a little bit more potential issues with the vaccine in pregnant women, their risk of severe complications from COVID is much higher than anything they would get from the vaccine.
And same thing with someone who's breastfeeding, like it's okay for, as far as you know so far in like the literature, like it's okay.
Absolutely. It's probably really great to do it while you're breastfeeding, actually, because there's antibodies in breast milk, and then it also contains immune cells themselves. And so some of the mother's immune cells that are making the antibodies may then go into the nursing baby and hang out in the bone marrow for a while and be memory cells eventually. So it could be even better than, it could be equivalent to the kid getting a vaccine itself.
A couple more questions. And again, I know that you're not a doctor, you're not people who's watching this as doctor, but just like off the top of your head, like, do you know if people with like blood clotting disorders can get the vaccine? Like,
so the blood clotting thing, they can get it. It's kind of unclear what is causing that VITT thing I mentioned before, that the one that's linked to the Johnson & Johnson AstraZeneca vaccines. So I think the mechanism behind people getting blood clots from that is different than the normal one. Because
what's it called? Like hemophilia or something, when you can't stop bleeding and stuff like that?
So yeah, when you can't stop bleeding, this is kind of the opposite, where it causes clots. And so it's going to make your blood a little bit thicker. So,
okay.
I think people that have clotting disorders may want to talk to the doctor a little bit more, but
okay. So if you have like a registered like blood clotting issue, you should speak to your doctor.
It's not a bad idea.
Okay. But so, you might, but you don't know whether or not you should or shouldn't get the vaccine until you talk to your doctor. So you should really talk to your doctor before just assuming you can't get it.
Yeah. So one thing is that like over-the-counter oral birth control pills, their risk of blood clotting, which is somewhat similar to the blood clotting you can get from the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson vaccines, the risk for that in birth control is hundreds of times higher than what is found in the vaccines. So
Okay.
like people who are already on birth control are already like, they've
So
got
if
a
you're
much
taking,
higher risk of the blood clotting thing happening than if they were to get the vaccine.
but I know so many
people
people
are
on
often
these
already
pills.
predisposed. Sorry?
I know so many people on these birth control pills. I didn't even know that there was like side effects.
Yeah, that's why they talk about like don't try not to smoke when you're on birth control, or like watch for
Oh,
blood clots if you're smoking on birth control.
so if someone feels is safe enough to take birth control pills, they're probably safe enough to get the vaccine. As
Yeah,
far as the blood clotting. Okay.
the risk from birth control pills is much higher than
It's
the
much
risk from it.
higher. That's really good to know. Okay, that's cool. Just a couple more questions. Thanks for giving your time today. Okay, so maybe get the vaccine. Okay. But what about wearing masks? If I bother to get the vaccine, do I still need to wear a mask? Like, what's the point? And like, what are just some things I can do to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 that are actually effective?
So the thing with masks is it seems to be that masks, especially cloth masks, have a tight enough fabric that it's able to trap what are called liquid droplets that come out of your mouth, or from usually from the lungs or the mouth. And the SARS-CoV-2 virus can be on those droplets. So the weave of a cloth mask is not tight enough to trap a SARS-CoV-2 virus if it was alone, if it wasn't on anything, it was just kind of floating in the air by itself. But they're more often seem to be found on these liquid droplets. And so those are big enough to get caught in the mask. So that's what you're really defending against is larger particles coming out of your mouth and going into the air that someone else is breathing. So they had relaxed the mask mandates before the Delta variant came out because it seemed like it wasn't going to be an issue. But again, Delta is changing everything. And so now that you can spread it while vaccinated, it's much better to keep masking to try and keep those liquid droplets from getting into other people's mouths.
So even if you've got the vaccine, you should still wear masks, even with other vaccinated people?
I mean, you can kind of set your own level of risk acceptability. So, sometimes I take a mask off to eat at my desk at work when my coworker is behind me. We're both vaccinated. It's just where else am I going to eat kind of thing. But so people kind of make their own level of risk, but it's especially if you're like in a grocery store or something, it's really good to keep masking because you don't know who's going to be sick and who's vaccinated and who's not. It's a little bit safer when everyone's vaccinated, but again, Delta's changing everything. So I would still mask up.
Okay, so still mask up at the grocery store. Man, okay. What else? Okay, fine. Which vaccines are actually good or any actually bad?
Doesn't seem like any are actually bad. Some seem to be more effective than others, but with these different variants coming out, the efficacy of certain ones seems to be different and it's changing. And so it's kind of unclear which ones are better right now versus what was better before. I think when they were first released, the Pfizer vaccine had a couple more percentage points of protection relative to the Moderna, but Moderna seems to be doing better against the Delta variant specifically. So it'll change throughout the course of the pandemic.
So I know you're based in Vanderbilt, which is in Tennessee, USA, but do you know anything about the Sinovac, Sinopharm, Covishield?
So
So a lot of those are popular in Asia, which is where I am.
Yeah, so I don't know much about those. The Oxford AstraZeneca one I know is pretty popular there, and that's the one I've looked into the most. I think a lot of the other vaccines are from heat-killed or otherwise inactivated viruses. And so the protection from those would be a little bit more similar to like a natural infection because it's the whole virus and not just the spike protein. And so one thing that's come out recently is that doing cross protection from different vaccines seems to be really good. So someone gave people either a Pfizer or Moderna, and then afterwards, after many months, gave them a Johnson & Johnson, and the protection from the two vaccines was really incredible, like very high.
Oh, so it's okay to mix vaccines.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you get both doses if you're taking a vaccine that gets 2 doses, but
Okay.
later on, if there's enough vaccine for the world and we can get secondary shots, it looks like a combination of the techniques is the best. Kind
Oh,
of like earlier when you were talking about the combination of natural immunity from having gotten the virus and the Moderna or Pfizer vaccines.
okay. I think I have one more question. I'm just gonna double check. If I have one more question. Okay, that's not really a very good question. Somebody asked, said, I just don't want to get the vaccine because it's my body and my choice. What do you think about that? Because like people should
Um,
right, they should have the right to choose. It's their body, their choice.
Yeah, so
So why should we
that
look at the
comes
vaccine?
into an area that I'm less well versed in, which is like theory behind public health. And so I'm very pro bodily autonomy.
Right, right.
Then there's the whole uh, making sure that you're taking care of. I mean, you live in a society, and you want to try and make sure that your society is healthy. And so I think that the benefits of getting a vaccine in making sure your society still functions pretty well is better than the slight risk that you might have of some side effects from the vaccine. I mean, the vaccine's pretty innocuous. A lot of the stuff, is in your body already, or they're similar to compounds you're already taking. It's injected into the muscle. It's not going to change your DNA. It's not going to give you cancer. It's a pretty simple thing, and it's not going to cause you any problems, really,
Mm.
most likely, and it'll save a lot of people's lives.
So
So
some
it's
people, sorry, what? So it's what?
so it's less of a my body and my choice issue than a caring for your fellow human issue
But some
to
people
me.
really don't want to get the vaccine. Like, what should they do? Like, how can they keep people safe if they really just do not want to get the vaccine? Like, do you think that they should be allowed to go to the movie theater and school and everything? Like, well, how can it work for these people who really just don't want to get the vaccine because they just don't put anything unnatural in their body?
Um, I would mask. Personally, I wouldn't go to the theater or to
The
many
bar?
restaurants, but because you're also taking your own health into your hands, it's not just about other people. Like
Oh,
the risk of catching and dying from COVID seems to be getting higher, especially with Delta variant again. And people who are unvaccinated are dying and regretting not having been vaccinated. Actually, one of my dad's really close friends, who I've known for 20 years, just died of the virus in California. His wife was pretty anti-vaccine, and now her husband is dead,
that's really sad.
and it was preventable.
Yeah. Well, on a slightly happier note, thanks for devoting so much of your time today, Dr. Eastman, on educating us about the vaccine and the risks and the benefits. Is there anything else you think we should add that can just help people have a better understanding, or do you think that's pretty comprehensive?
I feel like I answered most of the main questions.
All
If you
right.
have concerns about your own health and your health history, talk to your doctor before getting the vaccine. But it they most of okay, the vaccines seem to be efficacious and not very dangerous for people, and uh, the scientific community is trying really hard to make them safe.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Eastman. I will see you later.
All right.
I'm going to stop recording. Hang on a second.